Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. Welcome to the channel. Well, as you can see, this week, it's all about Nakamichi. Before we jump into things, I wanted to mention and do some reminders of some things I'm looking for. And one of those is unusual audio items. So if you've got something that you don't think anyone's ever seen or is extremely rare or just plain weird, I'd like to see what that is. I'd like to make a future video of that. I've received some things so far and I appreciate those, but I'd like to get a few more of those before I make a video. So if you've got something, send it on in. Next up, viewer systems. If you'd like me to showcase your system on a future video, send me those pictures and an overview of what you've got in your system or collection, and I'll cover that and add that to a future video. Next up is brochures. If you have any brochures, I'm really looking to try and get these. They're very handy, and there's nothing better than a brochure to cover a video about specific items. So those are very handy. If you have any of those, let me know. I'd certainly like to get those on hand. Next up is recommended repair shops. If you have had your system or any components repaired anywhere and you can recommend their service, let me know. Send me an email and let me know. I'm keeping a running list of repair shops that we are recommending so others can benefit from that. And then lastly, I still want to do a quadraphonic overview video. I've done some research, but again, I'm not well versed in quadraphonic history. So if you're somebody who is very familiar with it and comfortable doing sort of a Zoom video conference with me and talking through it, reach out. Or if you have some material you'd like to share, a summary of some sort, send that over and I'd certainly appreciate it. Well, as you can see, it's all about Nakamichi this week, and I've decided to set up a bit of a display here with several of my Nakamichi cassette decks. Now, I think most of us who are collectors are quite familiar with Nakamichi, and even if you're not from the era, if you're from the 70s and 80s, you certainly heard the Nakamichi name, and if you're like me, you always associate it with high-end cassette technology, and that was their area of expertise, and they excelled at it. They made some of the best cassette decks ever made at the time and since then. I've been able to acquire for my collection, as you can see, quite a number of units, and quite happy and quite excited to have them. Now, I don't play them that often. I don't have a lot of cassette media, but I'm thrilled to be able to find top-of-the-line units and some very unique units that were offered in their line. And for a period of 20 years or so, they were just the best at anything related to cassettes. And if you have any desire to be a collector, you're certainly seeking out some of the top-of-the-line units in just about any brand. And so I've been able to acquire some of these. This is the this was the top of the line in their offering in 1980, and this is the 1000 ZXL. Prior to this, there was a 1000 and a 700 model, and then they upgraded those and offerings in 1980, and they became the 1000 ZXL and the 700 ZXL. Now, these are known as the computing cassette decks because they had computers that were driving several of the functions in the background. And it was called Able, and that was a little computer for each area. That was the azimuth, the bias, the level, and the equalization. And that is all encompassed in this box. It's a very complex cassette deck by far, and if you're going to get somebody to work on these, it really has to be someone who is quite knowledgeable about the circuitry for these extremely complex units. So around 1982 or 83, the Nakamichi Dragon was released. And this was, I would say, the zenith of Nakamichi design. For one thing, you can see it's quite a departure from the prior top of the line, where while it's cool, it's got lots of cool buttons and the interface is very interesting. The Dragon, I can recall it being on talk shows way back when in the 80s when I was a young man, and it was very distinctive with these angled buttons and very distinctive little turning knobs. Everything was very distinctive about it. It's absolutely set itself apart from everything, you know, in audio electronica of the day, and was you know, quite an eye catcher. Not just visually, but from a spec perspective, it was arguably the best deck ever made. And it is highly sought after, of course. Anything top of the line for any era is always you know, very collectible. And the Dragon sort of has a bit of mystique to it, a bit of a fever pitch, if you will, and collectible circles. If you're any sort of collector, you most likely want to have, if you're collecting cassette decks anyway, you certainly want to have a Dragon in your collection if at all possible. Now, every time they released a deck, it seemed to have a bit of a unique feature that set it apart from everything else. And that's the case with these other two decks as well. This is the 680ZX, and it's a fantastic deck. The one unique feature that it has is the ability to record in half speed. And by doing that, you could double the amount of recording time on the cassette. So that took a 60-minute cassette to 2 hours. So a very cool feature. The only exception, of course, if you play it in that speed, the only place to play that again would be the same cassette deck or another 680ZX if you had a friend that had one. But don't believe they ever offered half speed in any of the car stereos, so you couldn't have taken it to your car. It would have to be probably a home recording. The next one over, this is the RX 505, and I also remember seeing this one on television as well because of its very unique feature, and that is the cassette. It doesn't have the ability to play the tape in the opposite direction, auto reverse. Instead, the front door comes out and the tape flips around and then goes back into position. Seems like it's just a gimmicky feature, but the reality is that the tape heads don't move and they're in the same place. It's the cassette that moves into position. So that was a very well thought out feature actually, and it's a very good design. And just cool on top of that, seeing the cassette come out and flip around, you know, it's just cool. And I like to play it sometimes. It's a great sounding deck, but I'll have to be honest with you, I love to see it flip around. It's just fun. You know, it adds a little bit of a wait and see kind of moment in between the music, and you know, I have to say I kind of geek out on that just a little bit. It's kind of fun. And then lastly, we've got some car audio here to talk about, which is a first for the channel. I am primarily, of course, a home audio collector. I don't really collect car stereos, but I just got lucky some time ago. I ran into a situation where I was buying sort of a group lot, and I don't know really much about car audio and still don't, but Nakamichi is obviously a brand I'm quite familiar with, and I made a quick assumption that the car stereos were probably of high quality given that they were Nakamichi. And so I bought them as well, and they happen to be new old stock. They actually have their original box, a little bit worn, but they still have the box. It looks like it came from old dealer stock that was never installed, but very cool. I will, oh, so these were at a time frame, so this is early 80s, right? And Nakamichi is at the peak of their popularity. They are, you know, nearly considered the best cassette deck manufacturer of the day. Cassettes are the media, and if you want to take your tunes on the road, you had a cassette deck in your car. And if you had an exotic car, you wanted the Nakamichi in there. So as I understand it, Ferrari released and sold, when they sold their cars, they didn't sell them or ship them with stereos in them. The stereos were added at the dealership, or the new owner went somewhere and had them installed. Well, many of the dealerships were installing Nakamichi cassette decks in those Ferraris. And I guess they were, fairly highly regarded, of course, to get sort of that stature. But that was sort of, as I understand it, a fairly common thing. A lot of the Ferraris of that time frame came with or had Nakamichi decks installed. This would have been one of them, I believe. This is a TD700. Happens to be an anniversary edition, but quite cool. I'll give you some, I'll get closer so you can see what these look like. You can't see them from there, but let you get up close and just get an idea of what these decks look like. All right, well, this is a Nakamichi cassette deck. And just off the bat, I wanted to point out that it has still that bit of Nakamichi Dragon look to it. Has those angled buttons, and it has that sort of sharp edges and contours that the Dragon has. So they carried it over to the car stereos as well. So this is a TD700, and this one does not look like it's ever been installed at all. It's a new old stock model. Again, I was extremely lucky to find this, but pretty cool. I think really everything that you could probably squeeze into a car stereo, this one has. Hopefully that's focusing and you can see it pretty well. I'll put a picture up so you can see it also. And the other one is, let's see, this one, I can't remember the model numbers as much on these. This is a TD700C, and this is the 10th anniversary edition. Pretty much the same as the 700. I'm not seeing off the bat here anything that's completely different, other than maybe some color changes to the fonts here. Yeah. Other than that, I'm not really sure what else is different on the 700C, other than it being a special 10th anniversary. But functionally, it seems to look the same, and looks like it has the same function as the 700. But that's pretty cool. Again, this one also new old stock. It doesn't look to have ever been installed anywhere. And I have powered these up before, just to make sure that they were powered up just fine. But anyway, this is Nakamichi's car stereos, and these were considered top of the line of their day in the 1980s before we all moved to CDs. So this is really just a high-level touch point of some of the models from Nakamichi. I will do a separate review video for each one of these, so you can get a little more up close and personal for all, each one of these. They have a lot more detail, a lot more specs, a lot more stuff to talk about. This was just an overview I wanted to do to give you a little bit of insight into some of the models that, for one, are collectible and that I have in my collection, but a little bit of the offerings from Nakamichi during the 80s. So it's quite an exciting time, and these are some of the models that represented it. Well, I guess that'll do it for this week. Hope you guys appreciated the setup here. It took a little time to sort of get this all together. Look for those upcoming videos on the rest of these individual units. If you don't want to miss the next video, hit subscribe. Give us a thumbs up while you're there. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.